Hey everyone, Gamer LCD's alter ego Alakon, self-proclaimed best DK in the world, filling in for him today. And in this video, with Mr. Pandaria right around the corner, I thought I'd make you guys a video all about Death Knights and speed leveling in the new Mr. Pandaria raid zone. So if you're planning to go for server first or world first as a Death Knight leveling up, then these tips are for you. Now, please take note that all of these tips are assuming that you have been playing in Death Knights for at least an expansion or so, and so you're familiar with all the Death Knights spells and abilities and abbreviations for their spells. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and dive right in here. So first up, let's cover your guys' specializations. Now in Mr. Pandaria, there is always going to be a best spec for leveling, and that's just because of the way different specs have advantages over other specs. So in Death Knight's cases, our best spec for leveling is Frost, and that has been the case for, Cataclysm and even early in Wrath of the Lich King. And that is because of two reasons. One, Frost doesn't have any ramp up time. It's instant burst damage, which makes it so you can kill mobs a lot faster. And number two, if you were to play an Unholy, it has a ton of ramp up time, and you have to rely on your pet and your diseases to do all your damage with 0 to no expertise. And you're going to be needing a ton of expertise and hit when leveling in Mr. Pandaria, because there's a huge gap between stats in Cataclysm and in Mist of Pandaria. So with that, let's actually dive into the next, which is the talent grid for Death Knights. Now, I actually covered this in a previous video, as where I said that the Death Knights talent grid is all messed up and unbalanced and unusable currently, and hopefully they will fix that. But if you guys want to hear about that, you can go ahead and check out that video. But instead, I'm going to be giving you guys a huge break and actually telling you guys in a really awesome talent build that is going to be awesome for leveling, and I'm actually going to give you scenarios about when these talents will actually become useful when you're leveling. So let's go ahead and start with the first talent, which is Unholy Blight. And for those of you who don't know, Unholy Blight surrounds the Death Knight with a vile swarm of unholy insects for 10 seconds, stinging all enemies within 10 yards every 1 second, infecting them with blood, plague, and frost fever. Now, please take note that this does not deal damage. It instead just spreads diseases over and over again for 10 seconds. So now here's a scenario where you guys can actually use this. So let's say you guys run into a huge pack of monsters, but you don't have enough time and you don't want to waste resources and global cooldowns hitting Outbreak and Pestilence. What you can do here is hit Unholy Blight, and it will spread the diseases to everyone within the area, and you won't have to worry about wasting runes and resources and time spreading Pestilence and Outbreak on one target. And this will spread the diseases for you. It's actually really useful when you want to save time and resources. Now for tier 30, you have three choices. You have a choice between Lichborn, Anti-Magic Zone, and Purgatory. Now tier 30 isn't really necessary for leveling, so you don't actually have to pick a talent if you want to, but I know nobody's going to be doing that. So if you really must pick a talent, go ahead and choose Anti-Magic Zone, because Lichborn and Purgatory are probably going to be useless. Unless of course you're on a PvP server, then Lichborn might be something you might want to pick, so that way if you do engage in PvP unwantingly, you can go ahead and hit that, and basically you can hit Death's Advance, which I'm getting ready to talk about, and you can run away and save yourself some trouble. Now moving on, tier 45 is all about crowd control and movement control, so you're going to want to completely ignore Chillblains and Asphyxiate and keep your eye on Death's Advance. You passively move 10% faster, and movement impairing effects may not reduce you below 70% of normal movement speed. And this is also an on-use effect, so when you actually activate this ability, you also gain 30% movement speed, and it may not be slowed by below 100% of normal movement speed for 6 seconds. And also please take note that this does stack with other movement increasing effects. You could potentially use this while in Unholy Presence, while a Paladin is in your party using Crusader Aura, or if you have a buff from an NPC that gives you movement speed increase, you can stack that as well. So it's a really awesome talent that's going to be used in PvE and in PvP. Chillblains and Asphyxiate, not so much. here is a scenario in which you can actually use Death's Advance in a certain scenario. What I came up with is that you're going to be doing a lot, since there's not going to be any flying in the new Pandaren zone until you're level 90. The best way to take advantage of Death's Advance is when you don't have enough time to mount up, or if you're in a cave or a dungeon, you can actually hit Death's Advance. It's on a 30-second cooldown, and you can actually move through the dungeon even faster. And if you're using Unholy Presence, which I don't really recommend because Frost Presence is really mandatory for the Frost specialization. So you can also use Shifting Presences, which is the glyph I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but you can also stack that and run through the dungeon as fast as you possibly can. Next up, tier 60, which is all about self-healing. You have Death Pack, Death Siphon, and Conversion, and this tier has already been mathed out, which is one of the reasons why this tier is actually terrible in terms of actual balance. Death Pack is 100% always going to be used, and that's in PvP and in PvE, and here's why. Death Pack is on the same exact cooldown, a 2-minute CD, with Raise the Dead. So what happens is, the ability has changed from live. It now basically drains 50% health from your pet, in exchange gives you that 50% life. So in live, you would actually have to sacrifice your pet in order to get not even 50% of your health back, but instead now you can actually gain up to 100% of your life back, depending on where your life actually is when you use Death Pack. Now the reason why Death Siphon and Conversion are terrible is because, one, Death Siphon costs a rune, and Conversion costs a ton of runic power. So, you're never going to want... Well, I guess you could use Conversion sometimes, but when I leveled to 90, I found that Death Pack was very optimal. Death Siphon was a terrible idea, and Conversion just takes up way too many resources, especially in the in-game PvE content and in PvP content. When I actually first started using Conversion when I was leveling up, Conversion just didn't allow me to keep attacking monsters. It actually slowed me down because I never had any runic power, because I was always constantly self-healing myself. Now here is a situation where, well, actually I'm not going to give you a situation, but I'm going to give you the best way to actually use Death Pack and Raise Dead to your advantage. The best way to do it is just macro them together, because they're not on the same global cooldowns. You can actually hit both at the same time, and it automatically heals yourself 50% of your life. And your pet actually continues to fight for you for 2 extra minutes, so it's really awesome. There's really no need to be an unholy spec for that. So next is tier 75, which is all about rune regeneration, which lots and lots of Death Knights are pretty much unanimous at this point on the beta forum, saying that this tier should not be there. We should not have to choose how we regenerate our runes. Basically, the argument is you shouldn't have to. I mean, you wouldn't have a healer choose how to regenerate mana, would you? You wouldn't have a paladin choose how to regenerate holy power, would you? So having to choose how we regenerate runes is a terrible idea. But if this is how it goes on Mist Pandaria Live, then it's already been mathed out for you. If you're a Frost, you're going to want to pick Runic Empowerment, and if you're Unholy, you're going to want to pick Runic Corruption. Basically, Blood Tap isn't even an option anymore, even for tanks. So since we're going to be leveling in Runic Empowerment, what you need to know is that every single time you hit a Frost Strike, you have a 40% chance to activate a fully random depleted rune. And usually those are Death Runes, because Death Runes are usually the first things to go after you hit Obliterate. So basically what this means for you is basically nothing. You just need to hit Runic Empowerment because that's what your spec calls for. Sorry to hear that, but Blizzard just doesn't want to listen. Now that we've completed all of our first 5 tiers, tier 90 doesn't really matter because you're not going to have a tier 90 talent until you actually hit 90, and the whole purpose of this video is to get you guys to level 90 as fast as possible. So we will not be covering level 90 talents. If you want to learn more about those, you can check out my last Death Knight video where I say Death Knights are going to suck in MoP. But moving on, now we're going to be talking about glyphs. Now, if you aren't familiar with the new glyph system in Mist Pandaria, it has changed a lot since Cataclysm and Wrath. They've completely removed prime glyphs, which basically were just damage increasers, so they said that was a bad idea, and instead they just reverted back to major glyphs and minor glyphs, and we basically have a ton of cosmetics glyphs, which is what they originally wanted the glyph system to be. So basically, Minor glyphs don't even matter. You can basically choose whatever you want with those. But we do have some important major glyphs that we need to take a look at because they are pretty essential to fast leveling. So now let's cover those. First up, we have Glyph of D&D, which basically allows your Death and Decay to act as a 50% slow. So here's a situation where you can actually use Death and Decay, where you have a ton of NPCs following you, but you actually just want to run away because you just completed a quest. So you drop down to Death and Decay, you hit Death's Advance, and you run like the wind until you're out of combat and you can mount up and head to the quest turn-in. Second, we have Glyph of Unholy Command, which basically allows your Death Grip to instantly reset its cooldown every single time you kill an enemy that grants experience or honor. Now, the reason why this is good is because you're going to be doing a lot, and I mean a lot, of chain pulling in Mist of Pandaria. Like I said, you're going to be pulling mob after mob after mob, and the reason why this is good is because you need Death Grip. Death Grip allows you to stay in one spot. You can Death Grip every single mob to you without having you to run to every single mob, which might accidentally pull even more mobs that you didn't actually want to take to kill. So here's a scenario where you can actually just, chain Death Grip everything. Last up for our major glyphs is Glyph of Shifting Presences, which basically allows you to retain a bunch of runic power every single time you shift to another presence. So in our case, as a leveling Frost spec, we're probably going to want to switch to Unholy Presence when we want to move faster through a cave or another area which we can't mount up in. So you hit that Death's Advance, you hit Unholy Presence, you retain all of your runic power, and for some reason a mob decided to attack you, so you now have extra runic power that you might not have had if you didn't have that glyph to actually kill the monster as fast as possible. Now, I did mention that minor glyphs really aren't important. You basically can choose whatever you want in there, but there is one minor glyph that you're going to want to pick up, which is Glyph of Path of Frost, and the reason for that is because there's huge mountains and cliffs and environments and water in Mist of Pandaria. And what Glyph of Path of Frost does, if you're familiar with it from live in Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm, when you fall from a large distance, it basically reduces a ton of damage that you would have taken without this glyph. So basically what this allows you to do is jump over cliffs, fall down from really high distances without having to take all of that extra time to actually follow the path that Blizzard gave for you. Instead, you put on this glyph, you fall from this huge cliff, you just saved yourself an extra 2, 3, 4 minutes following the path that Blizzard actually wanted you to take. So go ahead and pick up this glyph. All the other minor glyphs, you can pick whatever you want. So that pretty much wraps up this video, guys. The last thing I have to tell you guys is I have to give you a couple more miscellaneous tips that I might not have covered in the talent section or the glyph section. So the first tip I have for you guys is never, ever, ever, and I mean never, look at loot from quest givers. The good thing about Mist of Pandaria loot is it's now based on your class and your specialization. So when I was questing in the beta, I found that all the tank gear was on the left side of the quest log screen, and all the DPS gear was on the right side. So when you get ready to complete a quest and you see the loot that you can acquire from this quest, always choose the left side if you want tank gear for in-game content, and always choose the right side for DPS gear. And the only exception I found to this when I was actually questing to 90 was a weapon. This quest giver had the opportunity to give me a two-handed sword, I think it was, and it happened to be a DPS weapon. Other than that, it's always going to be tank on the left side and DPS on the right side. The second tip I have for you guys is always skip the cutscenes. If you're really into the lore, you wouldn't be trying to get server first or world first anyhow. So always skip the cutscenes whenever you can, because there are a ton of RP driven quests in Mist of Pandaria where there's a ton of dialogue and you have to wait for NPCs to do this and NPCs to walk over here. So always skip whatever you can by hitting escape. The third tip I have for you guys has to do with vendoring items. Never ever waste time going to the city to vendor items. Get as much bag space as you possibly can and shove everything in there. If you happen to meet a quest giver that has a vendor, sure, repair yourself and vendor all the stuff that you don't want, but do it quickly, because You don't want to waste time shifting through all that gear to see what stats it has or how much it vendors for. Just vendor it, get rid of it, or keep it all in your bags until you hit level 90, because I actually was able to store everything in my bags questing from 85 to 90, so it is possible. Just clear your bag out of all this unnecessary crap that's all level 85 stuff. Just put it in your bank and save room for the loot. The last and final tip I have for you guys is do not waste your time doing random dungeons to level up. If you're going for server first or world first, you can't rely on other people, especially with the new expansion. People have no idea what they're doing in the dungeon. They're going to slow you down. You might find quests in there, dungeon quests, but those aren't going to be worth it in the long run. I was actually able to quest all the way from 85 to 90 in about 20 hours played, so don't bother with dungeons. If I had done a dungeon, it probably would have taken me a lot longer, because you have to wait for the queue timer first of all, then you have to wait for the group to actually get ready and figure out what they're doing in the dungeon, and then you also have to wait for NPCs in the dungeons, because there are NPCs in the dungeons that you have to follow and things like that. So that is my final tip to you guys. If you have any questions, and I mean any questions at all, leave them in the comments below or DM me on YouTube, and I will be sure to answer them. Also, my name is Gamer LCD, aka Alicon, the self-proclaimed best DK in the world. If you guys want, I'll put my armory link in the description below. Hit the like button for this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for a bunch of content. Also, check out my live streams at twitch.tv/gamerlcd, where I will currently be streaming Race to World First Level 90 DK. And this is just a rumor. I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but there are rumors going around that there's going to be a worldwide release. So, worldwide simultaneous release. So, don't expect Europe to be getting it first. I'm getting it first. But yeah, that's the end of this video, guys. Thanks for watching. I will see you